Republican Congressman Chuck Edwards of North Carolina is pushing back on the disinformation and conspiracy theories Donald Trump and his allies continue to spread in the aftermath of Hurricane Helene and around Hurricane Milton. In an email to his constituents yesterday, Congressman Edwards, who represents Western North Carolina and otherwise has been a supporter of President Trump, wrote in part, "These conspiracy theories, while certainly frustrating, have done more harm than most people may realize. The spreading of falsehoods has diverted state, local, and federal resources from helping NC-11, his district, recover toward refuting hearsay and repeatedly trying to set the record straight." The North Carolina Republican went on to write, "It is disappointing to have to send an email dispelling the outlandish rumors being spread online about Hurricane Helene response and recovery." Meanwhile, President Biden yesterday called out Donald Trump by name for lying about the federal response to Hurricane Helene, and Republican Congresswoman Marjorie Taylor Greene, who's been pushing absurd conspiracies that the federal government can control the weather.
Over the last few weeks, there's been a reckless and irresponsible and relentless promotion of disinformation and outright lies about what's going on. It's undermining confidence in the people in Florida and incredible rescue and recovery work that has been undertaken. Literally, there are thousands of fellow Americans who are putting their lives at stake and putting on the line to do the dangerous work that needs to be done now. And it's harmful to those who most need the help. Quite frankly, these lies are un-American, and there's simply no place for them. Not now, not ever. Former President Trump has led this onslaught of lies. Assertions have been made that property is being confiscated. That's simply not true. They're saying people impacted by these storms will receive $750 in cash and no more. That is simply not true either. They're saying that money needed for these crises are being diverted to migrants. What the heck are they talking about? Stop it. It's outrageous. It's just not true. Now the claims are getting even more bizarre. Marjorie Taylor Greene, the congresswoman from Georgia, is now saying the federal government is literally controlling the weather. We're controlling the weather. It's beyond ridiculous. It's so stupid. It's got to stop.
Let's bring in the host of MSNBC's Inside with Jen Psaki. Jen Psaki. Jen, good morning. Great to see you.
Good morning.
We've been sort of saying this morning, and you as someone who worked in that press office at the White House, that the President of the United States would have to stand at a lectern at the White House and say to the American people and to people who are skeptical, no, the government does not control the weather, and no, the government does not engineer hurricanes to go to red states or specifically red districts that support Donald Trump. It's sort of a breathtaking moment, but sadly, it has to be said out loud, and it's not just President Biden, but it is the congressman from North Carolina, Republican governors and senators who've had to really drive this message home that FEMA is not here to take your land, for example.
No kidding. And I think it's so important to keep restating, as you have this morning, this is not normal. I talked with Secretary Mayorkas about this the other night. He's never seen any level of misinformation during a hurricane crisis response or any emergency response like the one we are seeing now. And before he was Secretary of Homeland Security, he spent many, many years working in the Department of Homeland Security. And when you have that Republican member of Congress whose district was undoubtedly won by Trump by multiples, saying this is harming the people in my district, that should be a huge wake-up call. The other thing Secretary Mayorkas said to me, which has stuck with me, is that people are not applying for programs they're eligible for. They're not, of course, listening to advice about evacuation. They don't know what's true and not true, but people are hurting themselves because of the amount of misinformation out there. It also made me think, Willie, just about, I was working for Barack Obama in 2012 when he was running for re-election during Hurricane Sandy, and you all remember that well. Chris Christie came and traveled on the plane with us. Yeah. Now, it may have hurt Chris Christie politically later, but the point is that these moments are moments when Democrats and Republicans, people have stood together to respond to communities in trouble. And Trump is like lighting a fire at that tradition and also hurting the people who are impacted.
So, Steph, one of the things the Trump campaign has latched on to in terms of disinformation or false claims, where they've seized onto this idea of a $750 payment. You roll your eyes as I even broach the subject. So can you explain to viewers what exactly this is, why they think it's a talking point, but give us the truth.
Donald Trump claiming, yes, if you can get it, he's just going to, Joe Biden is just going to give you this candy, this $750. So it's as though you got something, and there will be absolutely nothing behind it. So if they try to give it to you, refuse that money. Because if you take the money, you're basically signing off saying, I won't take anything else from the government. It's just a flat out lie. Right. So on one hand, we should be talking about how dangerous this is and problematic and how stupid it makes the Trump campaign look. However, they don't do any of these things by accident. So it makes you wonder and it makes you worry about the political calculation, because we can all sit here and talk about how dangerous it is, but many of the people in these areas aren't watching us right now. They don't even have access to national news, given what they're going through. And you worry that in these states where every vote counts, is it perversely going to help them?
And that's why it's been so important to have these Republican governors come out and say again and again, FEMA is doing its job. The Biden administration is helping us. We disagree with them on almost everything, but this is not a time for division, even though it's coming right from the top and Donald Trump. So, Jen, let's take a step back and talk more broadly about the state of the race here. We are under 4 weeks till Election Day. We know early voting underway, people mailing in ballots. It's all coming up quicker than people even realize, I think. So what is your sense as we sit here now about the state of the race? We were talking with Mike Murphy a little bit earlier about some concern about the state of Michigan, that some messaging from the Trump campaign about electric vehicles, though false, may be cutting through there. Where are you seeing as important areas of emphasis for the Harris campaign?
Well, first, somebody asked me when I was getting coffee yesterday, what's the state of the race? And don't tell me it's close. It's like, well, it's close.
It is. I know.
I think what's important for everybody out there to understand right now is not only is it very close, but even as everybody watches Donald Trump be self-combust at times on the stage when he's doing events, be hard to follow, confusing, the campaign and kind of a layer below him is running a far more disciplined effort in terms of the types of paid media they're doing on digital, on local advertising, et cetera. Does that mean it's going to be successful? I'm not suggesting that. All I'm suggesting is it shouldn't be underestimated. And to Steph's point, they are doing things, and many of them are gross and disgusting and false and misleading, but they are doing some things quite purposefully, which is driving a great deal of division and putting out misinformation. And from my vantage point, their strategy seems to be this. They know that he has a low ceiling, that he doesn't have a massive place of expansion. They have not run a campaign as if they are trying to pull more voters into the umbrella. So therefore, it is a, let's take down Harris, brutal, negative type of campaign, which unfortunately in the world we're living in and the level of misinformation and confusion out there, some of that can be effective. The last thing I'll say, because I just want to end on an optimistic note, is that it's not the worst thing for people out there to be a little freaked out that this election is going to be close, because it is. And Michigan, there are some troubling spots in Michigan, as many people who represent areas there, like Debbie Dingell and others, have said. It's going to be close. Harris has made up a lot of ground, but people should know and understand that when they can early vote and participate in the process, now is the time, and they can't sit on their couches because they could be the difference.
Jen, I know you said you wanted to end on an optimistic note. I may not let you.
All right, it's okay. It's okay.
I want to get your take,
we
though.
can real talk too. I don't think it's I don't think it's always the worst thing for people to be a little freaked. But go ahead.
I agree with that, and certainly people in the Harris campaign too do that as well, which is why they keep portraying themselves as the underdog. I'm curious to get your take on what is sort of an unusual, or seemingly unusual, Trump campaign strategy they kind of announced yesterday. He's going into some pretty deep blue places. We know he's heading to Aurora, Colorado, where he's going to make a big deal out of immigrants. That's another place where they have lied and put people's lives in danger in terms of how they have suggested that migrants have overrun that town, when officials there say that's simply not true. He's also now scheduled a rally for Madison Square Garden, right here in Manhattan, at the end of the month, which seems to me, it's certainly a big arena. If they can fill it, that'll create great images for a final week of TV ads. It also occurs to me there's probably a lot of protests. Maybe he doesn't mind that image as well. What do you think?
Sometimes he's not always playing three-dimensional chess. So, you know, I can try to explain some of it or what my assessment is. I think he is a person who makes a bet on national media and on social media and on how that's going to play less than he does on his own role in the local strategy. Obviously, he hasn't been campaigning as a traditional candidate. He does not have traditional operations in states, which, by the way, he also didn't have in 2016. And the Harris campaign has an advantage there, but in 2016, he didn't have them either, which I think is important for people to remember. So to me, I think he has a couple of things written down on a piece of paper, which are like scare people about the threat of migrants, which is absurd and gross, but that's one of his campaign messages. Talk about crime. I'm interested in whether that is maybe part of his message in New York. I don't know, but that was something that that had an impact in 2022. And I think he makes a bet that when he does these campaign events and rallies, that the impact is not necessarily on winning the state. I don't think he thinks he's going to win New York, but the New York media is there. It will be covered extensively. It'll be picked up, and it's about kind of the ricochet effect after that. But that's my best assessment, and sometimes he just does odd and weird things that we can't necessarily explain in advance.
Yeah, sometimes you don't have to overthink it. Jen Psaki, thanks so much. We, of course, will be watching Inside with Jen Psaki Sundays at noon and Mondays at 8 p.m. Eastern Time, and Stephanie Ruhle will be watching the 11th hour weeknights at 11 p.m. Eastern. Thank you both. Good to see you. Coming